I knew something was wrong the second I logged into my bank account. My stomach dropped as I stared at the screen, the numbers blurring before my eyes. Three charges I didn't recognize. One to $49 at Nordstrom, eight to $79 at Apple, and $2,340 at some jewelry store I'd never heard of. What the actual fuck? I whispered to my empty apartment. I blinked hard, hoping the transactions would disappear. They didn't. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the rest of my statement, finding five more charges I hadn't made. Over $7,000 gone in 2 days. I called the bank immediately, my voice shaking as I explained the situation to the representative. She asked me the standard questions. Do you still have your card? Has anyone had access to your personal information recently? Yes, I have my card, I said, pulling it from my wallet to confirm. And no, I don't think. I stopped mid-sentence as a terrible thought crossed my mind. Zoe, last weekend, my apartment. We'd had wine while watching movies. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, and she'd stayed over. She knew where I kept important documents. She knew my habits, my passwords, everything. We'd been best friends for 12 years. Ma'am, are you still there? Yes, sorry, I said, my mouth suddenly dry. I need to check something. Can I call you back? I hung up and immediately texted Zoe. Need to talk. Emergency. Call me ASAP. While waiting, I paced my living room trying to calm my racing heart. This couldn't be happening. Not Zoe. There had to be another explanation. My phone buzzed with a text. In a meeting. What's up? I typed back. Someone used my credit card. $7,000 gone. Need to talk now. Three dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, that's terrible. Call the bank? The casual response made my skin prickle. No shock, no outrage, no offer to call me right away. I called her, straight to voicemail. Fuck. I threw my phone onto the couch and collapsed beside it, my head in my hands. I needed proof before I accused my best friend of stealing from me. I opened my laptop and logged into my email, searching for the credit card alerts I'd ignored yesterday. There they were, purchase confirmations sent directly to my email. I checked the IP address information in the email headers. The purchases were made from a location in Bellevue, where Zoe lived. My phone rang. Susan from work. Hey, Kaya, she said when I answered. Are you okay? You never miss team meetings. The meeting, I'd completely forgotten. I'm sorry, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm dealing with something personal. Anything I can help with? I hesitated. Susan was a friend, but not someone I usually shared personal problems with. My credit card was stolen, I said finally. Someone charged thousands of dollars. That's awful. Do you know who did it? I have a suspicion, I said carefully, but I need to be sure before I do anything. Well, let me know if you need anything. The team misses you. After hanging up, I sat motionless, staring at the wall. The betrayal felt physical, like a knife between my ribs. 12 years of friendship. Countless secrets shared. Holidays spent together when neither of us could go home. Zoe had held me when I cried through my divorce from Heath last year. Heath. I grabbed my phone and opened Instagram. I hadn't checked his profile in months, part of my healing process. His most recent post was from 3 days ago, a sunset photo at a restaurant I didn't recognize. I scrolled through the comments. Beautiful view, babe. Can't wait for tomorrow. The comment was from Zoe, posted 2 days ago. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. I clicked on Zoe's profile, which showed no recent activity. She was always careful about what she posted, but her tagged photos told a different story. There she was, in a photo posted by a mutual friend last week. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable, Zoe and Heath, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. The room spun around me, my best friend and my ex-husband, the two people I had trusted most in the world. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bitter bile. Leaning against the cold tile wall, I tried to breathe through the panic and betrayal crushing my chest. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Sorry, crazy day. Dinner tonight? We can talk about your card issue." I stared at her message, rage replacing shock. She wanted to have dinner? Act normal? After stealing my money and sleeping with my ex? I stood up, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, my face pale, but something else was there too, a hardness I hadn't seen before. "Enough," I whispered to my reflection. I texted back, "Perfect. Your place at 7. I'll bring wine." Tonight, I would look her in the eye. Tonight, I would hear her admit what she'd done, and then I would decide exactly how to make her pay. I spent the afternoon in a fog of rage, methodically gathering evidence, screenshots of the credit card charges, copies of the email confirmations, photos from social media showing Zoe and Heath together. I organized everything in a folder on my phone, ready to confront her with proof she couldn't deny. By 6:30, I was parked outside Zoe's condo building, rehearsing what I would say. The bottle of wine sat in the passenger seat, her favorite Cabernet that we'd discovered together on a weekend trip to Napa 3 years ago, back when I thought I knew who she was. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. "How are you holding up?" I typed back, about to confront the person who stole my card. "Wish me luck." Her response came quickly. "Be careful. Want me to call in 30 mins with an emergency if you need an exit?" I smiled despite everything. "Yes, please. Thanks." At exactly 7, I knocked on Zoe's door, my heart hammering against my ribs. She opened it wearing an outfit I'd never seen before, a silky emerald blouse that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, probably bought with my money. "Kaya!" She hugged me like nothing was wrong. "Come in. I ordered Thai food." Her apartment looked different. New artwork on the walls, a designer lamp I recognized from a store we'd browsed together last month. I'd commented on loving it, but couldn't justify the $600 price tag. "Love what you've done with the place," I said, my voice carefully neutral as I handed her the wine. "Oh, thanks," she beamed, taking the bottle. "Just a few little upgrades. Life's too short not to surround yourself with beautiful things, right?" I nodded, swallowing the acid rising in my throat. "Right." We moved to her kitchen where she opened the wine and poured 2 glasses. The familiar routine felt surreal now, like watching actors perform a play about our friendship. "So tell me about this credit card nightmare," she said, leaning against her new marble countertop. "Did you call the bank?" I took a sip of wine, watching her over the rim of my glass. "I did. They're investigating." "Good. Any idea who did it?" The audacity nearly took my breath away. I set my glass down carefully. "Actually, yes." I pulled out my phone. The purchases were made from an IP address in Bellevue, specifically from this neighborhood. Her expression flickered, just for a second, before she composed herself. "That's crazy. Maybe someone was using public Wi-Fi nearby?" "Maybe." I scrolled through my phone. But then I noticed something else interesting. The items purchased? They're things I've seen recently. I turned my phone toward her, showing a receipt for the lamp currently illuminating her living room. Her face paled. "Kaya, I can explain." "Can you also explain this?" I swiped to the photo of her with Heath. "Or were you planning to tell me about that too?" She set her wine glass down hard, red liquid sloshing onto the counter. "You're spying on me now?" "Spying? It was on Instagram, Zoe. You didn't even try to hide it." "Heath and it just happened." She crossed her arms defensively. "After you two split up, We've been divorced for 10 months, I cut in. How long have you been seeing him? She looked away. 8 months. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. 8. You were consoling me about my divorce while secretly dating him? It wasn't like that. Her voice rose. You were so wrapped up in your own misery you couldn't see anything else. Do you know what it's like being your friend? Always in your shadow, always the sidekick? I stared at her, speechless. You had everything, she continued, her words tumbling out faster. The perfect job, the perfect husband, the perfect life, and you took it all for granted. So you stole from me, started sleeping with my ex-husband behind my back? That's your justification? I borrowed the money, she said, her voice smaller now. I was going to pay you back. With what? Heath's money? The pieces suddenly connected. Is that why you're with him? For his money? Her expression hardened. Don't act so superior. You married him for the same reason. I married him because I loved him. And look how that turned out. She smirked. He wasn't happy with you, Kaya. He is with me. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed my phone and started forwarding the evidence to myself, to Susan, to the police department's fraud email. What are you doing? Alarm crept into her voice. Ensuring you can't delete this evidence. I looked up at her. You're going to return everything you bought with my money, or I'm pressing charges. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Go ahead. It's your word against mine. Who do you think people will believe? The bitter divorcee or the woman who's finally happy? My phone rang. Susan's promised emergency call. I ignored it. You know what your problem is, Zoe? You think you won, but you just showed me exactly who you are. I picked up my purse. Keep the stuff. Keep Heath. It'll cost me less in the long run than keeping you in my life ever did. Her face contorted with anger. You think you're so much better than me? You have no idea what I'm capable of. I paused at the door. Actually, that's the one thing I finally understand perfectly. Walking to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a photo of Heath and Zoe at what looked like a party, champagne glasses raised in a toast. The caption made my blood freeze. Celebrating our engagement. Can't wait to tell the world. I leaned against my car, my legs suddenly weak. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war, and I was woefully unprepared. I didn't sleep that night. The engagement photo haunted me. Their smiling faces, the diamond ring visible on Zoe's finger. My ring. The one Heath had given me 4 years ago, the one I'd returned during our divorce settlement. By morning, I'd moved from shock to calculation. I needed help from someone who understood the digital world better than I did. Someone who could help me figure out exactly what Zoe had access to and how to protect myself from whatever she was planning next. I texted Vada, my old college roommate who now worked in cybersecurity. Need your expertise. Personal emergency. Can we meet today? Her response came within minutes. Coffee at Analog on 5th, noon. I spent the morning at the bank, closing accounts and opening new ones. The fraud department representative looked at me with pity when I explained that my best friend had stolen my card information. Unfortunately, we see this kind of thing all the time, she said. The people closest to us often have the easiest access. By noon, I was sitting across from Vada in the back corner of the coffee shop. She hadn't changed much since college. Still rocked the undercut hairstyle, still wore all black, still had that intense gaze that made you feel like she could see right through you. You look like shit, she said by way of greeting. Thanks, it's been a rough couple of days. I explained everything, the credit card theft, Zoe and Heath's relationship, the engagement announcement. Vada listened without interrupting, occasionally typing notes on her laptop. When I finished, she pushed her glasses up her nose and leaned forward. First, we need to figure out exactly what she has access to: email accounts, social media, banking, cloud storage, everything. Then we change all passwords and set up two-factor authentication. She paused. But that's just defense. What do you actually want to do about this? I hesitated. I want justice. I want her to face consequences. Legal consequences or personal ones? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Do you want to press charges for the fraud, which might be difficult to prove without a confession? Or do you want to expose her to your social circle? Or do you want something else entirely? Her eyes narrowed. I need to know where the line is, Kaya. I stared into my coffee. I don't know yet, but I need information first. I need to know what else she's been doing, what else she's planning. Vada nodded. That I can help with. Let's start with a deep dive on her digital footprint. For the next hour, she showed me how to secure my accounts and helped me set up monitoring for any suspicious activity. Then she started digging into Zoe's online presence. She's careful, Vada muttered, scrolling through data. Private accounts, minimal digital trail, but everyone leaves traces. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. Hey, everything okay? You seemed upset yesterday. I'd forgotten to follow up with her after her emergency call. I typed back, not really. Zoe stole my credit card info and is engaged to Heath. 3 dots appeared immediately, then, what? Coming over tonight. No arguments. Wine and takeout on me. I smiled weakly. At least I still had one friend I could trust. Found something, Vada said suddenly. Zoe's been searching for information on your parents. My head snapped up. My parents? Why? Hard to say, but she's looked up property records for their house, your dad's retirement information, and your mom's medical history. A cold feeling spread through my chest. My mom's medical history? How is that even possible? If she had access to your accounts, she might have found medical proxy information or insurance details. Vada looked troubled. When did you last talk to your parents? Last week. They're in Arizona for the winter. I pulled out my phone and called my mom, trying to keep my voice casual as I asked if anyone had contacted them recently. Actually, yes, Mom said. Zoe called yesterday. She was so sweet checking in on my arthritis. She mentioned you've been under a lot of stress at work and might not be thinking clearly. My hand tightened around the phone. What else did she say? Just that we shouldn't worry if you say anything unusual. She said you've been working too hard and having some episodes. The manipulation was so calculated it made me dizzy. Mom, listen to me. Zoe and I aren't friends anymore. She stole from me. Don't share any information with her, okay? Silence then. Honey, are you sure you're all right? Zoe said you might say something like this. I'm fine, Mom. I promise. Just be careful with Zoe. After hanging up, I looked at Vada, my hands shaking. She's trying to isolate me, make people think I'm unstable. Vada's expression darkened. Classic gaslighting. She's getting ahead of you, controlling the narrative. What do I do? You need leverage. Vada turned her laptop toward me. And I think I found some. 3 years ago, Zoe worked at Meridian Financial. She left suddenly, no explanation. But I found forum posts from that time suggesting an employee was fired for accessing client information inappropriately. You think that was Zoe? Worth investigating. If she has a history of this behavior, it changes everything. Vada closed her laptop. But Kaya, be careful. This isn't just about credit card fraud anymore. She's actively trying to undermine your credibility. I nodded, a new determination settling over me. I need to talk to someone from Meridian. I can help with that too. Vada pulled out her phone. My client list includes people from most major financial institutions in the city. As she scrolled through contacts, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't just fighting to recover what I'd lost. I was fighting for my reputation, my relationships, my future. And for the first time since this began, I understood that playing defense wasn't enough. To beat Zoe at her own game, I needed to become something I'd never been before: a hunter. Susan arrived at my apartment that evening with Thai food, 2 bottles of wine, and a fierce protectiveness that made me want to cry with relief. We sat on my couch as I showed her everything I'd discovered with Vada. "This is insane," Susan said, refilling our glasses. "I always thought Zoe was a bit much, but this is next level psycho." "I keep trying to understand why," I said, pushing my food around my plate. "We've been friends for so long. Some people can't stand to see others happy." Susan took a sip of wine. "Remember when you got that promotion last year?" Zoe barely acknowledged it. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "At your celebration dinner. You were so excited, and she kept changing the subject to her dating problems." Susan shrugged. "I noticed, but I didn't say anything. Didn't seem worth mentioning." The memory resurfaced: Zoe's tight smile as everyone toasted my success, her constant interruptions. I'd attributed it to her having a bad day. "There were other times too," Susan continued. "When you bought your car, when you and Heath got engaged, she always seemed to have a crisis that needed attention whenever something good happened to you." My phone buzzed. A text from my colleague Marcus. "Hey, just checking in. Heard you're going through some personal stuff. If you need more time off, let me know." I stared at the message. I hadn't told anyone at work except Susan about my situation. "What the hell?" I showed Susan the text. "That's weird. Who would have—" She stopped, her eyes widening. "Zoe knows Marcus's wife from yoga, doesn't she?" My stomach dropped. "Yes, they're in the same class." I called Marcus immediately, asking what he'd heard. "Just that you're dealing with some emotional health issues," he said awkwardly. "Tara mentioned it after talking to Zoe yesterday. Said we should give you space." "Marcus, that's not true. Someone stole my identity and is spreading rumors about me." Silence then. "Shit, really? That's terrible." After hanging up, I turned to Susan, my hands shaking with anger. "She's poisoning everyone against me, making me look unstable so no one will believe me when I tell them what she did." "We need to get ahead of this," Susan said. "What did Vada say about Meridian Financial?" "She's setting up a meeting with someone who worked there when Zoe did." I checked my watch. "Tomorrow morning." "Good. In the meantime, maybe we should reach out to people before Zoe gets to them." Susan pulled out her phone. "I can help." We spent the next hour making calls and sending texts to friends and colleagues, briefly explaining that I was dealing with identity theft and that any concerning rumors were related to that situation. Most people were supportive, though a few responses were awkwardly noncommittal. By midnight, Susan had fallen asleep on my couch. I covered her with a blanket and went to my bedroom, exhausted but too wired to sleep. I scrolled through old photos of Zoe and me, trying to pinpoint when things had changed. There we were at her 30th birthday, arms around each other, laughing. At my wedding, her maid of honor speech bringing tears to everyone's eyes. Hiking in the Olympics last summer, posing at the summit. Had she hated me through all of it? Had our entire friendship been a performance? My phone buzzed with a text from Heath. "We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow?" I stared at his message, my first direct contact with him in months. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part needed answers. Fine. Cafe Vita on Pike, 7 a.m. I barely slept, and by 6:45, I was already at the coffee shop, nursing an Americano and rehearsing what I would say. When Heath walked in, the familiar sight of him hit me harder than expected. His purposeful stride, the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was nervous. He sat across from me, looking uncomfortable. Thanks for meeting me. What do you want, Heath? He sighed. Zoe told me about your accusations. Kaya, if you're struggling, there are people who can help. Stop. I held up my hand. I'm not struggling. Zoe stole my credit card information and made thousands in purchases. That's a fact. She showed me the receipts, he countered. She bought those things with her own money. Did she show you the IP address information? The email confirmation sent to my account? I leaned forward. Did she tell you she's been researching my parents and telling people I'm having a mental breakdown? Doubt flickered across his face. Why would she do that? You tell me. You're the one marrying her. His eyes widened slightly. How did you know about that? We haven't announced it yet. She sent me a photo of your engagement celebration. What? No, she wouldn't. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. She knows I wanted to tell you myself, in person. That's why I'm here. I laughed bitterly. How considerate of you. Kaya, listen. He lowered his voice. Things with Zoe happened fast. I never meant to hurt you. Yet, here we are. I stood up. Congratulations on your engagement. I hope you've protected your financial information better than I did. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist. Wait, what do you mean by that? I looked pointedly at his hand until he released me. Ask Zoe about Meridian Financial. Ask her why she really left. His expression changed. What do you know about that? Not enough. Yet. I shouldered my bag. But I will soon. Walking out, I felt my phone buzz with a notification. An email from Vada with the subject line, "Found something big." I opened it to find documents from Meridian Financial's HR department, confidential termination papers for Zoe, citing unauthorized access to client accounts and misappropriation of funds. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a surge of something like hope. This wasn't just my word against hers anymore. This was evidence of a pattern, and patterns were something I understood very well. Vada's contact at Meridian Financial was a woman named Elise, who agreed to meet me at a quiet bar downtown after work. I arrived early, choosing a booth in the back where we wouldn't be overheard. The termination documents Vada had sent were burning a hole in my bag. I needed to understand exactly what Zoe had done. Elise arrived precisely at 6, her crisp pantsuit and alert eyes marking her as someone who didn't waste time. After ordering drinks, she got straight to the point. I shouldn't be talking to you about this, she said, her voice low. But what Zoe did at Meridian wasn't just unethical. It was predatory. What exactly happened? I asked. Elise took a sip of her martini. She worked in client relations, had access to financial profiles, contact information, the works. We started noticing a pattern. Wealthy clients, especially recent divorcees or widows, would suddenly change their investment strategies after meeting with her. She was stealing from them? Not directly. She'd build relationships with vulnerable clients, gain their trust, then convince them to move money into special investment opportunities. These were real investments, but with hidden referral fees that went to her through a complicated chain. My stomach tightened. Was she caught? Eventually, one client's son was a financial analyst. He reviewed his mother's portfolio and spotted the irregularities. Elise's expression hardened. When confronted, Zoe tried to paint the client as confused and unstable. Sound familiar? I nodded, my throat dry. What happened to her? We fired her, but the client didn't want publicity. No charges were filed. Elise leaned forward. Here's what you need to understand. Zoe doesn't just want money. She wants to be the person who has everything: status, admiration, control, and she'll target anyone who has what she wants. Like me, I said quietly. Like you. Elise checked her watch. I have to go. But there's something else you should know. After she was fired, 3 more clients came forward with similar stories. One lost over $200,000. As Elise left, I sat alone, processing what I'd learned. This wasn't just about my credit card or even Heath. Zoe was systematically dismantling my life because she wanted it for herself. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. Emergency at work. Client server crashed. Might need your help remotely. I texted back that I'd be available, then ordered another drink. As I waited, a man approached my table. Kaya, I thought that was you. I looked up to see Fabian, one of Zoe's friends from her yoga studio. We'd met a few times at parties, but I barely knew him. Mind if I join you? He asked. Just for a minute. I hesitated, then gestured to the seat across from me. Sure. He sat down, looking uncomfortable. I overheard Zoe talking about you yesterday at the studio. The things she was saying, they didn't sound right. My guard went up immediately. What kind of things? That you've been harassing her, that you're obsessed with her relationship with Heath and making up stories about her. He fidgeted with a napkin. But the way she was talking, it reminded me of how she talked about her former boss after she left that financial company. I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. Why are you telling me this? He sighed. Because she did the same thing to me last year. We dated briefly. When I ended it, she told everyone I'd stalked her, that I was dangerous. I lost friends, got uninvited from social events. Eventually, I had to find a new yoga studio, new hangouts. Why did you go back to her circle? She reached out 6 months later, said she'd exaggerated because she was hurt, apologized. I believed her. He shook his head. But seeing her do it again to you, I had to say something. Do you have any proof of what she did to you? Some texts, emails. He pulled out his phone. I saved everything after things went bad. As he showed me the messages, I felt a strange mix of validation and dread. The patterns were identical: Zoe's manipulation, gaslighting, the careful construction of a narrative that made her the victim. She's engaged to my ex-husband now, I said. Fabian's eyes widened. Heath, the entrepreneur guy? I nodded. That explains the sudden interest in investment properties. At my confused look, he continued. She's been asking me about real estate lately. I'm a commercial broker. She said she and her fiancé are looking to diversify their portfolio. A cold feeling spread through my chest. When did this start? About 2 weeks ago, right after she got engaged. He pulled up an email on his phone. She was particularly interested in this property that's in pre-foreclosure. Owners going through a messy divorce, needs to liquidate quickly. I looked at the email and froze. The property was my parents' winter condo in Arizona, the one they'd put in my name for estate planning purposes years ago. This is my property, I whispered. What? But Zoe said it belonged to an investment group that's dissolving. My hands shook as I pulled up my own email, finding the foreclosure notice I'd dismissed as spam last week. It was real. Somehow Zoe had initiated foreclosure proceedings on my parents' condo. I need to go, I said, gathering my things. Thank you for telling me this. Outside, I called my lawyer, explaining the situation in a rush. He promised to look into it immediately, but warned me that stopping a foreclosure already in progress was complicated. As I hung up, a text came through from an unknown number. Back off or your parents lose everything. Last warning. I stared at the message, my fear transforming into something harder, colder. Zoe wasn't just trying to take my identity or my ex-husband. She was going after my family. The time for defensive moves was over. If Zoe wanted war, I would give her one, and I would make damn sure she regretted ever making me her enemy. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Michael, in his downtown office. The walls were lined with law books that probably hadn't been opened in years, but the intimidating atmosphere felt appropriate for the conversation we needed to have. I've reviewed the foreclosure documents, he said, sliding a folder across his desk. They appear legitimate on the surface. Someone used your digital signature to initiate the process. Can you stop it? Yes, but it will take time and money. He named a figure that made me wince. The bigger concern is how this happened at all. Your digital signature requires your authentication. Zoe had access to my accounts, I explained. She must have found the property documents when she went through my files. Michael leaned back in his chair. Kaya, this goes beyond civil fraud. This is criminal identity theft, wire fraud, possibly even elder abuse since it involves your parents' retirement property. You need to go to the police. I've tried. They took a report about the credit card fraud, but said it was he said, she said, without more evidence. I rubbed my temples. And now Zoe's convinced half the people in my life that I'm having some kind of breakdown. Then we need to build an airtight case. He pulled out a legal pad. Let's start with everyone who can corroborate your story. By the time I left Michael's office, we had a plan. Gather statements from Vada, Elise, Fabian, and anyone else who could verify Zoe's pattern of behavior. Document everything. Prepare for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. Heath, what do you want? I answered. We need to talk, in person. His voice sounded strained. It's important. I'm busy trying to save my parents' retirement home from the foreclosure your fiancé initiated. Silence then. What are you talking about? Ask Zoe. She used my digital signature to start foreclosure proceedings on my parents' condo in Arizona. That's, that can't be right. He sounded genuinely shocked. Look, please meet me. I need to show you something. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near my office in 30 minutes. When I arrived, Heath was already there, a manila envelope on the table in front of him. Thanks for coming, he said as I sat down. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. What's so important? He pushed the envelope toward me. After you mentioned Meridian Financial, I did some digging. Found these in Zoe's home office while she was at yoga. Inside were bank statements showing transfers from multiple accounts into one I didn't recognize, along with a handwritten list of names and figures. My name was at the top, with numbers next to various assets, my condo, my car, my 401k. She's been planning this for months, Heath said quietly, using my connections, my information. I had no idea. I looked up at him. Why should I believe you? You've been with her all this time. Because I'm on her list, too. He pointed to his name further down the page. With a timeline beside it, 3 months after the wedding, there's a note about accident insurance. A chill ran through me. You think she's planning to? I don't know what she's planning, but I'm not sticking around to find out. He ran a hand through his hair. I confronted her about Meridian last night. She went ballistic, accused me of spying on her, then got eerily calm and said I'd regret questioning her. So you're just leaving? I've already moved my important stuff out, staying with a friend she doesn't know about. He leaned forward. Kaya, be careful. When I said I was going out this morning, she asked if I was meeting you, specifically you. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. Where are you? Zoe just showed up at your office looking for you. Seemed agitated. I showed Heath the message, my heart racing. She's looking for me. You can't go back there. Heath stood up. Come on, I'll drive you somewhere safe. No, I gathered my things. I need to get to my parents. If she's escalating, they could be in danger. Then I'm coming with you. Why would you do that? Because this is partly my fault. His expression was pained. I should have seen through her. Should have asked more questions when she suddenly had all this information about your life. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Vada. Someone tried to access your new accounts, she said without preamble. They had all the right security question answers, but the two-factor authentication stopped them. When? Just now. The IP address traces back to your office building. Zoe was at my workplace, actively trying to hack my accounts. This was happening now. Vada, I need a favor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Can you monitor all activity on my parents' accounts? And mine? I think Zoe's making her move. Already on it. Where are you? With Heath. He found evidence of what she's planning. Vada was silent for a moment. Can you trust him? I looked at Heath, who was watching me with concern. I don't know, but right now, he's the only one who knows how she thinks. After hanging up, I turned to Heath. I need to warn my parents, then get somewhere safe to figure out our next move. As we hurried to his car, my phone buzzed again. A text from Fabian. Zoe knows we talked. She just called me, furious. Said she's taking care of the Kaya problem once and for all. Be careful. In the same moment, an email notification appeared, a bank alert about a large withdrawal request from my parents' account. It was happening faster than I'd anticipated. Drive, I told Heath as I called my parents. We don't have much time. Whatever Zoe was planning, she was accelerating her timeline. The hunter had become the hunted, and now it was a race to see who would strike first. My parents weren't answering their phones. After the fifth call went to voicemail, panic clawed at my throat. They always answer, I told Heath as he drove. Always. Try their neighbors, he suggested, eyes fixed on the road. I found their neighbor's number and called. When she answered, I forced myself to sound calm. Hi, Mrs. Donovan. It's Kaya. I'm trying to reach my parents but can't get through. Have you seen them today? Oh, Kaya. Yes, they left about an hour ago with that lovely friend of yours, the pretty one with the dark hair. My blood turned to ice. Zoe was there? Yes, she said there was some emergency with you. They seemed quite worried. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Zoe has my parents, I told Heath. She told them there was an emergency with me. Heath's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Where would she take them? I closed my eyes, trying to think. My condo, maybe? Or... A memory surfaced. Zoe mentioning a lake house her family owned, a place she'd gone when she needed to handle things privately. The lake house, I said, on Lake Sammamish. She has a family property there. Heath nodded and changed direction. Call the police. And tell them what? That my ex-husband's fiancé who stole my identity has now convinced my parents to go somewhere with her? They'll think I'm crazy. Tell them you have evidence of identity theft and elder abuse, and you're concerned for your parents' safety. I made the call, but, as expected, the dispatcher was skeptical. They promised to send an officer to the lake house address, but I could tell from her tone that it wasn't a priority. While Heath drove, I called Susan, Vada, and my lawyer, updating them on the situation. Vada confirmed more attempted withdrawals from my accounts and said she was documenting everything. Susan offered to meet us at the lake house. My lawyer advised caution but said he'd start emergency legal proceedings. As we approached Lake Sammamish, I received a text from an unknown number. If you want to see your parents again, come to the lake house alone. Tell Heath to stay away. I'll know if you bring anyone. I showed Heath the message. It's a trap, he said. I know, but I have to go. I looked out at the lake coming into view. Drop me off before the property. I'll approach on foot. Kaya, no, it's too dangerous. She has my parents, Heath. My voice broke. I don't have a choice. He pulled over a quarter-mile from the lake house. I'm calling the police again, and if you're not out in 20 minutes, I'm coming in. I nodded, suddenly grateful for his presence. Before getting out, I forwarded all the evidence I had to Susan, Vada, and my lawyer with a message. If anything happens to me, take this to the police. The walk to the lake house gave me time to think. Zoe had always been calculating, but this level of escalation suggested desperation. She must have realized I was closing in on her, gathering evidence. This was her last attempt to silence me. The lake house came into view, a modern A-frame with large windows overlooking the water. My parents' car was parked outside. Through the window, I could see them sitting at a dining table, Zoe standing nearby. I took a deep breath and approached the front door. It opened before I could knock. Finally, Zoe said, her smile cold. Your parents have been so worried. I stepped inside, scanning the room. My parents looked confused but unharmed. Kaya! My mother stood up. What's going on? Zoe said you were in some kind of trouble. I am, Mom. I kept my eyes on Zoe. But not the kind she told you about. Zoe's smile didn't waver. Kaya's been under a lot of stress lately. She's been making some concerning accusations. Like how you stole my identity? I pulled out my phone. Or how you used my digital signature to initiate foreclosure on Mom and Dad's condo? Or how you've been systematically trying to take over my life? My father stood now, looking between us. What is she talking about, Zoe? See what I mean? Zoe sighed dramatically. These delusions are why we're worried. They're not delusions. I stepped forward, showing them my phone with the evidence Vada had compiled. She did the same thing at Meridian Financial. It's all documented. Zoe's expression hardened. Your daughter needs help. She's obsessed with me since I got engaged to Heath. Is that why you have this? I pulled up the photo of the list Heath had found, with my assets itemized. Or why you tried to access my new bank accounts today. Or why you're on the verge of transferring money from my parents' retirement fund. My mother gasped, reaching for her phone. Margaret, don't, Zoe snapped, her composure cracking. This is exactly what she wants. What I want, I said, my voice steady, is for you to stay away from my family. Zoe laughed, a brittle sound. Your family? You couldn't even keep your husband interested. You couldn't even see what was happening right in front of you for months. You're right. I took another step toward her. I trusted you. That was my mistake. Your mistake was thinking you deserved the life you had. Her voice rose. You had everything handed to you. Loving parents, good job, perfect husband. You never had to fight for anything. And that justifies stealing from me, manipulating my parents, trying to take everything I have? You never appreciated any of it, she shouted, mask fully slipping now. I deserved it more. The room fell silent. My parents stared at Zoe in shock. Zoe, my father said quietly, did you really try to take our condo? She turned to him, scrambling to recover. No, of course not. Kaya's twisting things. Stop lying, I interrupted, my voice stronger than I'd felt in weeks. It's over, Zoe. The police are on their way. Vada has documented every attempt you made to access my accounts. Elise from Meridian is willing to testify about what you did there. Fabian has records of your manipulation. And Heath found your plans. At the mention of Heath, something dangerous flashed in her eyes. Heath wouldn't betray me. He already has. He's the one who brought me here. As if on cue, we heard sirens in the distance. Zoe's face contorted with rage. She lunged toward me, but my father stepped between us. That's enough, he said firmly. Zoe, I think you should wait outside for the police. For a moment, I thought she might attack him too. Then her shoulders slumped, the fight visibly leaving her. You'll regret this, she said, looking directly at me. All of you. As she walked out the front door, my mother rushed to my side, pulling me into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry we didn't believe you, she whispered. I held on to her, watching through the window as police cars pulled up and officers approached Zoe. It wasn't the revenge I'd imagined. There was no satisfaction in watching her being handcuffed, no triumph in her downfall, just relief that it was over, and a quiet certainty that I'd found something she never had, the strength to fight for what was mine without becoming what I hated. The police questioned us for hours. My parents and I sat at the lake house dining table, going through everything: the identity theft, the foreclosure attempt, the manipulation. When they finally left, taking Zoe with them in handcuffs, exhaustion hit me like a physical weight. You should stay with us tonight, my mother said, her hand warm on my shoulder. I nodded, too drained to argue. Heath had left after giving his statement, promising to send me copies of everything he'd found at Zoe's apartment. The betrayal still stung, but I felt an unexpected gratitude for his help when it mattered most. That night in my childhood bedroom, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Morning brought a flurry of activity. My lawyer called with updates on the legal proceedings against Zoe. The fraud department at my bank confirmed they were reversing all unauthorized charges. Susan texted that she'd cleared my schedule for the week and was handling the client emergency herself. After breakfast, my father found me sitting on the back porch, staring at the garden he'd meticulously maintained for decades. Your mother and I have been talking, he said, settling into the chair beside me. We'd like you to consider moving back home for a while. I turned to look at him, surprised. Dad, I'm 34. I know. He smiled slightly. But after everything that's happened, we just want you close. The offer was tempting: the safety of my childhood home, the comfort of my parents' presence, but something inside me resisted. I need to go back to my place, I said gently. I can't let what Zoe did make me retreat from my life. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. You always were the strongest one in the family. I don't feel strong, I admitted. I feel broken open. That's where the real strength comes from, Kaya. He patted my hand. From putting yourself back together in a way that makes sense to you, not anyone else. Later that afternoon, Vada arrived with a small team of cybersecurity experts she'd enlisted to help secure all our accounts and devices. As they worked, she pulled me aside. There's something you should see, she said, opening her laptop. I found this in Zoe's cloud storage. On the screen was a document titled Contingency Plan. It contained detailed instructions for what to do if her schemes were discovered, including a list of people to contact with pre-written stories about my supposed instability. She was thorough, I murmured. Sociopaths usually are. Vada scrolled down. But here's the interesting part. She had a section about Heath, too. Plans to isolate him from his friends, gain control of his business assets. I scanned the document, a chill running through me as I recognized the pattern. She did the same thing to me that she was planning to do to him, with one key difference. Vada pointed to a section labeled Timeline. With you, it was about taking what you had. With Heath, it was about becoming you. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Zoe hadn't just wanted my possessions or my ex-husband. She had wanted my life, my relationships, my identity, everything that made me who I was. There's more, Vada said quietly. She kept journals, years of them. Your name appears in entries dating back to when you first met. Show me. The earliest entry was from our college years. Met Kaya today. She has everything: the looks, the brains, the easy confidence. People gravitate to her without her even trying. I need to study her, figure out what makes her special. Then maybe I can become that too. I closed the laptop, unable to read more. All this time, I thought she was my friend. She was, Vada said. In her way. She just couldn't separate admiration from envy, love from possession. That evening, after everyone had gone, I returned to my condo. Standing in the doorway, I felt a momentary hesitation. This space had been violated, my privacy shattered. But as I stepped inside, I realized something important. These walls had witnessed my breakdown, but they would also see my rebuilding. I moved through each room, reclaiming it. In the kitchen, I threw out the wine glasses Zoe and I had shared so many conversations over. In the living room, I rearranged the furniture, creating a new configuration that felt entirely mine. In my bedroom, I changed the sheets, opened the windows, let fresh air sweep through. My phone rang, Susan checking in. "How are you doing?" she asked. "I'm recalibrating," I said, surprising myself with the word choice, figuring out who I am when I'm not defined by betrayal. "And who is that?" I looked around my transformed space. Someone stronger than before, someone who won't mistake manipulation for love again. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The blank document stared back at me. I began to type. To whom it may concern, I am writing to formally withdraw all charges against Zoe James. My finger hovered over the period key. Then I deleted the sentence and started again. To the district attorney. Regarding the case against Zoe James, I wish to provide additional evidence of her pattern of behavior. As I typed, cataloging everything with clinical precision, I felt no vindictiveness, no thirst for revenge, just clarity. Zoe needed to face consequences, not because I wanted to punish her, but because it was the truth. And after everything, truth was the one thing I refused to compromise. When I finished, I sent the document to my lawyer, then closed my laptop. Outside my window, the city lights sparkled against the darkening sky. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it would no longer be the defining chapter. I picked up my phone and deleted Zoe's contact information, her photos, every digital trace of her presence in my life. Not to erase the past, but to make space for whatever came next. Some friendships leave scars. The deepest ones change who you are. But standing in my reclaimed space, I finally understood. The person I was becoming after Zoe's betrayal was entirely my own creation, and far stronger than the woman she had tried to destroy.